What's up guys? Today's video is gonna be a little bit different. We're gonna do something I've never done before, and that's just kind of do a survey of country artists on streaming platforms. Pretty much anytime I mention radio on this channel, I'm always gonna get a few comments that are like, why are we talking about radio? I listen to Spotify, or I listen to Apple Music, or my work plays Pandora. Let's look at streaming numbers instead of radio to gauge success. And I think that's a valid point. But country music has not really ridden the streaming wave the same way like hip hop and R&B has, because when you hear about artists that are big on streaming platforms, you're talking Juice WRLD or The Weeknd, or if it's particularly this weekend, Taylor Swift, because her new album Folklore just broke all kinds of records. And I'm actually gonna talk about Folklore at the end of this video. But country music listeners have just been slower to adopt streaming, and it has never been as big on the platform. But according to a Billboard article that was recently published, it's been seeing a huge boom during quarantine. During 2020, country music is taking off on streaming. Some people speculate that's because often these songs are better for drinking, and a lot of people are drinking. Some say that it has a more naturally hopeful vibe about it, and people are gravitating toward that. But for whatever reason, country music on streaming platforms seems to finally be happening. So today I just want to look at a bunch of artists and see who's killing it and who's not killing it, and does that line up with our expectations. And the only metric that I really know that's publicly accessible that I can do that with is Spotify's monthly listeners. And obviously Spotify is only a piece of the puzzle. It's not including YouTube streams or Apple Music or stuff that's on Amazon Music or Google Play, but like I said, this is the easiest metric to look at. Got my computer right here, I got Spotify pulled up, and I'm just gonna start with this chart that was on the year-end 2019 Billboard list of the top streaming songs, artists, and country music, and see if this is still kind of the general people that are in the top. Okay, first up is Luke Combs. He's got 9.6 million monthly listeners, and Beautiful Crazy, of all songs, is his top song on Spotify. That's kind of surprising. Okay, and number 2 on that list was Dan and Shay, and they've got 14.3 million. Damn. And as predicted, 10,000 Hours, their collaboration with Justin Bieber, is their top song. But, I mean, Speechless and Tequila have a hell of a lot of streams as well. Okay, number 3 was Kane Brown, and he's got 16.4. That is our biggest yet, and his top 3 songs are all collaborations. So if you're just going for streaming clout, yeah, it definitely pays to have a collaboration in the pop world.
When I was getting crazy, reckless and wild.
Okay, number 4 was actually Chris Stapleton on the Billboard chart, and he's coming in with 7 million according to this, and that's definitely our lowest so far. But Tennessee Whiskey does have 300 million streams. Okay, in 2019, Florida Georgia Line was number 5 on the list, and they've got 12.4 million. That ain't bad. But if I'm looking at these numbers correctly, it looks like maybe a lot of those views just come from that song Meant to Be, their collaboration with BB Rexa. That's got over 3 times as many listens as their next most listened to song. Okay, number 6 was Jason Aldean on that list, and he's got 7.4 million. Number 7 was Blanco Brown. I'm guessing that was completely just due to the Get Up being viral. He's at 4.6 million now, and it looks like, other than his collaboration with Parma Lee, it's really the Get Up and then not much else. Morgan Wallen was number 8. I imagine he's only gone up since then. He's got 9.7 million. So he's actually ahead of Luke Combs, and granted, he's got Heartless, that big song with Diplo, but his top song on Spotify is Whiskey Glasses, sitting here making charts. At number 9 was Thomas Rhett, which seems crazy low to me. Yeah, on Spotify, he's got 13.4 million listens. Wonder why it was so low last year. And then number 10 on that chart was Brett Young, and according to Spotify, he's got 6.4 million monthly listeners. Now, there's some women that were not in that list that Billboard had, and I just imagine, like, I really think Maren Morris is gonna have a lot because of that song, The Middle. Let's see. Maren Morris has freaking 15.1 million. That's huge. And yeah, The Middle has extravagantly more views than anything else, but The Bones is a pretty huge hit too. I kind of forgot there was a Hozier remix of that song. What about like Miranda? Miranda's got 5.3 million. Carrie Underwood is at 6.2 million. What about Casey? Casey Musgraves. Damn, 6.4 million. So look, there's like one vote for radio is not the end all be all. Casey, who country radio just doesn't touch with a 10-foot pole, 6.4 million. Ashley McBryde, she's only got 1.8 million, so, you know, it's a good reality check for me, because I'm like, everyone's talking about Ashley McBryde, but it's like, she's not at that level of fame as some of these other artists. That doesn't mean she's not incredibly talented, but it's just interesting to see. Same could be said about Runaway June. I just looked them up, 598,000 monthly listeners, so maybe they're not as buzzy as I think. This is like The data's interesting. Now this is very interesting. I just looked up Maddie and Tay. 3.8 million monthly listeners. That's so much bigger than I would have expected. I mean, Maddie and Tay took a long break in between their first album and their second album. And their second album, I don't know, it was released at the beginning of quarantine. It's kind of been easy to overlook, but Die From a Broken Heart has become a big hit for them. And it looks like, other than Friends Don't, which was their first single, looks like I Don't Need to Know is becoming a big streaming hit for them. And I would not mind if that were the next single.
I don't need to know, I don't need to know, I don't need to know who's keeping you company.
And then let's do just some newer artists like Riley Green. Riley's at 2.6 million, which that surprises me. In my mind, I Wish Grandpa's Never Died was this huge hit. He had a big hit with There Was This Girl. And so to see Maddie and Tay are getting more listens than him, it surprises me. Hey, Jordan Davis, how about him? 4.9 million monthly listeners. Damn, Jordan. I mean, I'm sure his stuff fits nicely onto poppier playlists, but still a big number. Hardy is at 2.9 million, and that's pretty impressive since he just kind of has 1.5 hits so far, so I'm pretty impressed with that. Then let's look at some of the kind of radio stalwarts, the dudes that have been huge on radio for the past decade, like Blake Shelton, for instance. 7.9 million. That's pretty big. Keith Urban, 7.3 million. Seems like 7 million is where the A-list kind of sits around there. Rascal Flatts, let's try them. 7.2 million. I would have thought that was way lower, because I kind of feel like they've been mailing it in for years, but apparently they got their people. Luke Bryan, I'm very intrigued by this one, because he's a radio darling, but is he a Spotify darling? He's good, 8.6 million. But what's crazy is Luke Bryan has probably 40 number ones or something, and Morgan Wallen has more Spotify listeners now, so you can definitely see the generational divide a little bit. So that's just kind of a broad overview of the mainstream big radio names, and the big people in this realm are Kane Brown, Danny Shea, Maren Morris, Florida Georgia Line, Thomas Rhett, all of whom have big pop collaborations, and that seems to work really well for being able to playlist in country music and in pop music and get a lot of streams. I see why they're doing it. It might not make for the most interesting music to me, but clearly it works from a business standpoint. But then I want to look at a few other little niches.
Okay, I'm just going to step in here with a voiceover because I filmed for another 30 minutes after this, and you guys just don't need to see that. Here's what I did, and here's what I found in the rest of my experimentation of looking at Spotify monthly listeners. So first, I kind of went through some of our indie favorites to see, do these guys compete with the mainstream stars? And the short answer is not really, with a few exceptions. The most streamed one of them is Tyler Childers with 2.4 million monthly listeners. His biggest song is Feathered Indians, insert Thicket here. Cody Jinks was the next biggest with about 1.9 million monthly listeners, and honestly that really surprised me. After that we had Whiskey Myers and Jason Isbell. They both had about 1.3 million monthly listeners. Coulter Wall had 1.2 million, and then I was actually surprised by how low some of their counts were. Sturgill Simpson had 996,000, Margot Price was 393,000. I guess just based on buzz, I would have expected those numbers to be a little bit higher. Then I went over to the Texas and Red Dirt scene, and pretty much any Texas artist that has worked with Nashville on some level has the biggest streams by far. You had Cody Johnson with 2.4 million monthly listeners. You had Granger Smith with 1.5 million, Parker McCollum with 1.4 million. But the people that aren't playing ever on mainstream radio, that are just really regional to that scene, that still have over 1 million streams, are Turnpike Troubadours with 1 million, and they're hanging in strong despite not having any new music for quite a while now. And also Co Wetzel has 1.1 million monthly listeners, and that really amazes me because he's kind of hard to peg down. He's not even really country, so I don't even know if he plays necessarily on country stations down in Texas. And then after that, I looked up some what I called classic artists. These are just people that aren't necessarily playing on the radio right now. This is where the video got really long. I looked up about 1 million artists and found the top 3 were Shania Twain with 7.4 million monthly listeners. That is pretty amazing. Johnny Cash still gets 10.2 million monthly listeners. And then I'll just play you the part when I discovered Dolly Parton because I was pretty amazed.
Guys, Dolly Parton's at 11.4 million monthly listeners. That's incredible. That's bigger than Luke Combs. Dolly Parton is bigger than Luke Combs on Spotify. You heard it here first. This is why you keep adapting and you keep staying on all the new social medias and you keep, expanding your brand. That's amazing. So the big takeaways for me here are that when you look at the biggest artists, from a financial standpoint, they're very much incentivized to push in the pop direction and collaborate outside of country music. The other big takeaway in the mainstream is that a lot of the biggest streaming people are a lot of the biggest radio people. And so, I don't know, it's kind of a chicken and egg debate of which one is causing success in the other one, or is it just the label is pumping a lot of promotional money into making these songs hits regardless? Because if you think radio is corrupt, then you really got to start reading about playlisting. I do think some of the women here had pretty impressive numbers given the fact that there's such a smaller share of radio for them. And it sort of makes sense because if you are not going to find an artist on the radio, maybe disproportionately some of those fan bases find these artists on streaming. I think some of the younger artists also feel disproportionately embraced on these platforms. Like Morgan Wallen's numbers were huge. Obviously Kane Brown was kind of running the whole show here. And it makes sense. The younger acts have younger audiences that are on these platforms. Outside of the big current radio people, Dolly, I was blown away by those numbers. Johnny Cash's were huge. Cody Jinks, Tyler Childers, Co Wetzel, he's got some impressive numbers. So anyway, I hope this little portion was interesting. Now I'm gonna jump over into my little folklore review. I would do a separate video, but every time I cover Taylor on this channel, despite the fact that I am chasing traffic, it doesn't do that well. But a bunch of you guys have DM'd me and asked for my thoughts on folklore, and I listened to it on the way back from vacation this weekend, so I'll just put that here.
I had to come out here to the woods to talk about folklore. Forgive the cicadas and locusts making all that noise, but I just found a little natural area near my house and figured this is the right setting to talk about this new Taylor Swift album. This won't be like a full review. I was kind of gone all weekend, and I feel like I haven't given it a critical enough listen to do a full review, but I'd still rather talk about it because I love Taylor. I love whenever Taylor puts out music. I just feel like I'm on the journey with her. Even when she releases stuff that I'm not obsessed with, I just like following her career, and she's such a good songwriter, and she just keeps growing as a songwriter. And Folklore, she dropped by surprise, and what do I have to say about it? This album feels really like there's less ego involved in this album. I didn't even realize that was a thing that had been annoying me so much. It hasn't been annoying me so much, but when you listen to Folklore and just how effortless it feels compared to a single like Me, which had like this big rollout and that silly marching band breakdown, and it felt a lot more calculated, because it was. It's so refreshing. From the very little bit I've read about the album, I know that people say that Cardigan, August, and Betty are kind of the teenage love triangle. And I was like, wow, those are literally my three favorite songs, because I like how they play off each other. When I listened to August, I was like, wait a second, someone's pulling up in a car just like that happened in Betty. Those are my three favorite songs, and I think she does such a good storytelling thing with them. The first time I heard the album, Betty was just easily my favorite song. It makes sense coming from a country fan's perspective. We're getting some of that old Taylor. You hear that nice acoustic guitar. It's just simple. That harmonica and the key change, it's just super, super earnest. That kind of tale of James, who's named in the song, and I think it's meant to be ambiguous if James is a boy or a girl. Certainly when I hear the name James, I think guy, but I think Taylor also, she knows what she's doing. She wants this to be sort of a tease a little bit, or leave it open to, is this a love triangle between girls or whatnot? But just this whole storyline of James loving Betty, but Betty dancing with some other guy at the gym, and then James cheating on her and hurting her, and in Cardigan, Betty's looking back on their relationship. I just think it all works really, really well. I'm also a huge fan of Invisible String. That's one of the songs on here that definitely feels autobiographical, and one of the fun things I think about being a fan of Taylor Swift's songwriting is, now that we're on the 8th album, there are starting to be certain motifs of places that we keep revisiting, like the dive bar that you hear in this song. And it's interesting to like thread that back to Delicate and be like, oh, she met this guy that she's now singing about her anniversary on at that same dive bar, I'm guessing. That song's really, really pretty. I also think Illicit Affairs is so gorgeous, and kind of a sympathetic take on cheating. And she just paints the clandestine stairs and the perfume. It's kind of alluding to parking lots, just like we got on the song August, where James is cheating on Betty with Summer Girl. I gotta get mobile. People keep walking by right here. My Tears Ricochet has like a little bit of a sinister vibe, and I don't know if she's at her own funeral or if this is about Scott Borchetta. or if it's like the funeral of the old Taylor. I don't know, but man, as someone that doesn't really know how to feel anger, I'm like trying to learn that in my life. I just admire that Taylor can. I don't know how to do it. If I try to get angry at someone, I just end up feeling ashamed. That's like my MO. That's the one emotion I'm really good at. Same thing on Mad Woman, which is basically just like, look, if you call me crazy, I'm going to be more crazy. Some of these songs are really pretty, like Mirror Ball and Epiphany, but they're a little formless, and I think that's kind of the point. This is meant to be sort of vibey and atmospheric, and I think Aaron Dessner, for the most part, he didn't kind of like over echo chamber this that I think a lot of indie bands do, and that can just make the music feel a bit distant sometimes. I don't think he actually did that much, but there are moments on here like Mirror Ball and like Epiphany, even like Seven, where I just can't tell you really how they go once I'm done listening. But I don't want to overthink this one. I like the album a lot. Taylor is such a talented songwriter. The cobblestone streets. I mean, I'm just here for Betty is really what I'm here for. The hopefulness that song makes me feel. I don't know how it's not just the only thing everyone's talking about. Everyone's talking about The One and Cardigan. And yeah, those are good, but they're no Betty. At least to me. And I feel like other country fans are going to agree with that assessment. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Folklore. I've enjoyed listening to it. But now I gotta go listen to Laurie McKenna's The Balladeer. That's it, guys, for this weird video. I don't even know what it's going to be titled, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, bye.